dig in. I love the fact when I heard Dad Saves America, I was surprised about your interest and passion in education and school choice. Thank you, Lacey. You're wonderful. Um, so I want to hear a little bit more about, why is it not obvious to everyone that Dad's Saving America and school choice are like this? What do you think most people, you're probably the only person I know who spontaneously made that juxtaposition. Why do you think this is not more obvious to other people?
Well, I want to make sure I'm understanding clearly the question you're asking, because I think there's so much confusion, regardless of the issue of father involvement, just with school choice in general. I think that one of the things that is difficult is that when you I see a lot of this through the lens of raising a son in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at what's happening, and Warren Farrell has done a tremendous job of cataloging the boy crisis, which is really a male crisis. Mm-hmm. So across every dimension that you can measure through all of the first world, boys and men are on decline. College is now occupied by women to men 60-40. Women occupy most of the top disciplines, like that, law, medicine. Basically, it's only in STEM where you see, largely driven by just individual interests, that men still tend to outnumber women. And if that was simply a function of preferences, that would be one thing. That would be perfectly fine. People are different. Men and women are on average different. I just had one of my best friends since fifth grade. I still stay in touch with a lot of my friends from grade school. Courtney Moore. And she is an engineer, and she runs massive construction projects at a construction firm that's over 100 years old. So, any statement about the differences between men and women will never capture any particular person's interests. But I think there is something really radically underappreciated about how broken our school system is in general, but particularly for boys. 7 out of 10 teachers in general are women, but in the early grades, it's more like 9 out of 10. And so when you have a situation where the country, the young generation of the country, a large percentage of them have no father figure in their life, and then they go to a school that has almost no men to model what it means to be a good man, that's a big problem. And it's a problem that is just not talked about at anywhere near the level it should be. We are bombarded by messages about how we should celebrate all things girl power. And girl power is great. Women in STEM is great. Women in office is great. This is not a zero-sum game. For boys to catch back up to where they used to be and to live up to their potential doesn't in any way take away from girls. But I think that the role dad plays for boys in particular is just truly enormous. And then I think mom and dad probably, I don't know if there is a stronger determinant on average for who decide, who plays the bigger role in making school choices for their kids. I have no idea. Maybe Michael, you've come across some.
Mostly women, 80-90% women.
Yeah, I would expect that to be the case.
Yeah.
And I think that's also part of so that's part of my call to arms, is that my generation, I'm Gen X, I'm 44, and I think millennials are even more so. I think there is a slow redefinition or expansion of the gender roles on for men that I think is really positive, and it hasn't been, our culture hasn't caught up with it. But I I know that, I mean, I've always woken up with my son since he was a baby. I got up and made breakfast and took him to school, because if I didn't, I would never see him.
Mm-hmm.
And because of my commute when I was in New Jersey and New York, and for basically all of the guys I know, all the dads I know, are very engaged with their kids. Um, but we have not been given a lot of guidance from our culture for
Mm-hmm.
why we should really engage on all these other fronts. We're
Mm-hmm.
basically told, bring home the bacon,
Mm-hmm.
and that is not good enough. And so I think that dads leaning into the education choice is something that we should, I want to, push. I want to challenge dads who, if you see yourself as a dad first, and there's this neat thing that I'm sure you're aware of, Michael, because you're just like, you're like the genius of all this stuff. You're like a font of information. But when you become a dad, there's actually this thing called the dad brain that is like a neurological shift that takes place. I experienced it in a major way. It changed everything about. It took me like 6 months to regain my passion for work because of how much I was enraptured by being a dad and having this little boy. And um and so I think that, there's nothing that's it's great. That's great. And I think this there's like simple things that we can do. We can make choices to orient our life around doing. I think engaging with our kids' education is number one. I think number two is super simple. Like, get home to have dinner with your family.
Mm-hmm.
And then number three is like, don't put screen time on autopilot as a decision. Like, these are big things that we have to, and that I think, um, uh, you know, I was very fortunate because I had a lot of really great men. My dad, who's very much, still alive, and he's young. He was 23 when I was born. So my relationship with my dad is incredible, and I'm only successful at all to me because of my dad and my mom, both my parents. But I can't imagine what my life would be without my dad. My mom's dad, my grandfather, and my dad, and my uncle Bill, who unfortunately passed away really tragically this year, too early. They were these three strong men who were creative and kind. My father's a surgeon. I would go to the mall and people would come up to him and say, "Oh, Dr. Papola, you help me with my ears." He's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. He was known for having incredible bedside manner, the care, the and the rigor. I think dads can really play. Dads are wired to like projects, and I think projects are a really powerful way to learn and to explore what your interests are. And and again, nothing I'm saying is exclusion is meant to be exclusionary to moms. My mom's an artist and an art teacher, and I probably did as many projects, if not more, with my mom than my dad. But that physicality, I think, is a really essential. It's more essential now than ever
Mm-hmm.
because of how abstract school has become. I mean, obviously with COVID, it all went onto screens and just became, um, the full farce of the traditional school system really got laid bare over the past 2 years. But I know I've gone off on a wild tangent with your question, but
No, that's okay. So just kind of a couple of things. One is, I've spent a lot of time in, public schools, and I would say going back to the need that young men have for adult men. When I go through a public middle school and spend time there, I find there's a craving for adult male attention. And it's because the vast majority of the teachers are women, and of course, good for them, but there's a need, just a real hunger. And in the article I posted in the other session, there was a situation where these elephants, young elephants, were moved to a nature reserve in Africa, and they started becoming vicious and aggressive. And it was only when the adult bull elephants were added to the mix that they became civilized again. And, this is elephants. We can't blame anything except pretty much biology there. And so I think there is a really under recognized need for young men to have older men around them, and for dads to play a role, as you are saying. Then finally, it occurs to me that our society is so polemical, people arguing and attacking about everything, and the gender wars, it always goes into flame wars. And one of the things I love about Dad Saves America is it feels very kind of positive as opposed to polemical. So can you talk a little bit about how, I'm sure that's intentional, your vision for the kind of positive maleness of Dad Saves America, and maybe how that's been received?
Well, we're early days, but so it's a reflection of several things. So my first video that really tried to be more than just pure entertainment was our Keynes Hayek rap videos. Mm-hmm. And I think Keynesian economics is basically like akin to the what is the term, like the Philogen theory of fire? Like it has. Yeah. I'm sure I mispronounced that, but it's a very difficult word to remember. But it's nonsense. I mean, mm-hmm. it asserts, among other crazy things, that you get rich by using things up, aka consumption. Oh, consumers are 70% of the economy. It's like, well, if all we did was consume, we'd be out of stuff really, really fast. Which is another lesson I think we've all learned in the past couple of years, is that production is where the wealth comes from, not consumption. Consumption is the goal, production is the means. Mm-hmm. And yet, I think partly because of the temperament of both myself and Russ when we really engage in creative work, and partly because I'm a kid of Steven Spielberg and of the 80s, and of that the joy of that playful kid-like discovery. I love to do that with my creative projects. I like to be a big kid and have fun and play with ideas like toys. I've got Legos over my shoulder because I still buy Legos as an adult. And I think that with this issue, I don't think we need more lecturing about why dads are absent. Mm-hmm. Because, first of all, who's the audience for that? Because if the dad's not there, they're not watching the videos. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of what's happened in this, and I don't mean to cast aspersions on people who devote their lives to the issue as a political issue, but I also kind of do, because there is no political solution to the fatherhood crisis. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's little levers about the welfare state and I think there are big problems in the family courts that are actually much, much bigger than anything that people talk about with the welfare state. I mean, and I haven't gone through divorce. I don't, but I've heard from close friends that the family court system is really and truly rigged against men. Mm-hmm. And that plays a pretty substantial role in both, reducing father involvement and a lot of the other problems that come about. But I think we need to provide aspiration and inspiration. We need to say, hey, this is a positive thing. This is something you can do. I really believe. I mean, the two principles which I mentioned was that, to me, are like the essential bedrock of American freedom. Mm-hmm. It are the internal locus of control, the sense that my choices matter, that when I act, it has an impact. Mm-hmm. And it's my choice to act. And even when I react, that is my choice. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me, is a way of saying, you can say these things, but how I respond is my choice. Mm-hmm. I think that is essential. And I think the growth mindset, the belief that I can become more than I am today, I think that sits below the surface of capitalism and free markets. It sits below the surface of the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights We need freedom because we don't know what we're capable of. And so
Mhm.
we have to get out there in the world and go through trial and error to discover what our passions and our genius is. And I think you can only do that trial and error if you aren't afraid to fail,
Mhm.
if you understand that you'll survive it, and
Mhm.
if you believe your choices matter and that you're capable.
Mhm.
And so I think dads play a really important role in that, and I think that's an incredibly powerful, positive story in a very negative time.
Mhm. Love it. Love it. Laura George is asking, how do you reach dads?
Well, we've done research on, we created some original content, and we engaged with a large firm that we've worked with on our entertainment projects to try to understand, well, how many dads are out there that would be receptive to our message, and we found that um, there's over 20 million dads out there that are interested and hungry to have these kinds of ideas at their fingertips and have a lot of questions. So we're on YouTube because it's the second biggest search engine on the internet. It's, I think, the most powerful of the platforms for delivering this kind of message, and I think that's why you see like Jordan Peterson be such an incredible sensation on YouTube in particular. He's talked a lot about the platform in a positive way, and so that's our first step, is to build that hub on YouTube and then on our website. Um, I think in the future, I would really like that our brand to either partner with organizations that do this or start a division of our organization dedicated to local meetups and meetings. And the reason for that is it, among other things, but is that one of the problems we face is our kids relationship with screens is a big deal.
Mhm.
And one of the things I think this is like an anthropological scale shift that's happening for the human creature right now.
Mhm.
And I don't know what the answer is. I know for myself, I will sometimes wake up on a Saturday morning, and because I'm a social entrepreneur, I'll be drawn to sit and get coffee and start looking on my laptop. And sometimes a couple hours can go by, and after a couple hours on a Saturday morning, like looking at email and being on my screen, I can start to feel like the world is pretty dark, and so I will get this sort of indescribable sense of that there's problems, and it's incredible how quickly those feelings get erased if I go outside and do anything. Take a walk, work on the garage, pull
Mhm.
some weeds, anything physical, anything that gets me sun and air and green and blue.
Mhm.
And it used to be the case that you came home and cartoons were only on for about an hour after school, and then it was boring, like boring pre-prime time stuff for adults. And so you ran outside and you had
Mhm.
nothing to do, and it was boring, and then you invented stuff to do. And that, like, all the most important lessons in life were happening out there, not at school. I think now we have to consciously cultivate that like a gardener. It used to be that the wild was there.
Mhm.
Even just go back, even you don't have to go back that far. Just pre-internet. The wild was there. You got home from school, you were bored, your parents said go outside, and it was the wild. And now there's no wild space left. You have to actively create it. And I think this is something that dads um can be marshaled to do, moms and dads, frankly. What is it possible to get a neighbor, to get a group of parents in a neighborhood to make a little compact for their street that between 4 and 6 o'clock, all the devices get put away and the kids get kicked out of the house with the door locked. Um, that's something that I think is like one small step for kids that would be a giant step for their mental health. Um, there's things like that we want to explore over time. I think the biggest thing for me though comes back to the school factor. My son has benefited from us making conscious choices. He doesn't have any of the anxiety issues that his generation does. My son got his driver's license while he was still 16, which is increasingly rare. He
Yeah.
drives himself to school. He's
Yeah.
had a girlfriend.
And sadly, it's sort of an old-fashioned upbringing to get a driver's license and have a girlfriend and a job. Has he had a job?
He has had multiple jobs because
There you
Acton actually makes apprenticeship something that starts in middle school. So he took a. I'll tell you a quick story. He, as part of his acting experience, he sought out a internship at Amy's Ice Cream headquarters,
go. Hmm.
which has a kind of conscious capitalism like thing
Hmm.
they do, management philosophy. We had no role in this. I don't know how he came across. Why? I think it's just he likes Amy's ice cream. It's an ice cream. Great. It's great ice cream here in Austin. And he told us, oh, okay. I reached out and I heard from the Amy's people and they said I can come and work for them this summer. And we said, well, Mateo, that is like a 25-minute drive north of us. Like, I'm not doing that. And this was in 7th grade. So this was before he could drive. So he said, well, look, we'll drive you to the nearest bus station. You're going to have to figure out how to get there. And so he took public transit. And the stories he came back with from public transit were all kind of crazy.
Hmm.
People coming onto the bus like strung out on drugs, and a kind of like maybe not entirely mentally stable, deeply religious but judgmental guy coming up to him saying that he was a messianic figure and that everyone else on the bus was going to hell. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Crazy, crazy.
But you could feel him coming back and feeling great
Yeah.
and feeling accomplished. Last summer, he painted fire hydrants for the city of Sunset Valley.
Cool. When you talk about how do you raise your children well, jobs, girlfriends, work, your driver's license, all super important. I want to back up a little bit and I'm curious about the 20 million, dad audience. Is that, is that people with fathers with children of a certain age, or is it a certain demographic? How did they come up with that?
Well, I mean, this is sort of like marketing wonkery because I think any dad or wannabe dad or could be dad or whether you're active or whether you're estranged, I think can benefit from what I hope can find value in what we're doing. In this particular case, we put forward our videos that early versions of some of our initial videos that sort of lay out our thesis and asked people, are you interested in this? Does this resonate with you? Would you want to subscribe to this? And what sort of emerged out of that was that there is a kind of picture of what might be our best dad audience for this, who's relatively well educated, relatively well, higher income, and wants to is intellectually curious. That was a fundamental filter. We want to reach people who are intellectually curious. And so that picture is pretty diverse. It's across the ideological spectrum, although for what it's worth, the research suggested that it was sort of 2-to-1 Southern Democrats. Whether that turns out to be true of our audience or not, who knows? I don't really care. Those sort of political divides are a lot of noise, and I think this was sort of phase one. It was like when you're trying to create something new, it's great to try to fail fast and test your hypotheses before you start to invest a lot of resources into creating something, which is why we did it. So we didn't want it to say, well, there's only like 1 million people who care about this. I think there's way more than 20 million, but that's a good place for us to start. I mean, if we could if 10 years from now we could say we've reached 20 million dads with this hopeful, positive, action-oriented message about how I have 6 initial pillars that constitute, and I see, Lenore Skenazy's played a big role in informing what we're doing, actually. And she's featured in our launch videos, and we did a great film with her about her story. So here's my 6 pillars for Dad Saves America. Subject to constant evolution. Number 1, dad as hero, celebrating dad, elevating dad, making dad something you should be proud of, something that might be the first answer you give in a dinner party when someone says, "What do you do?" What do you do? Mom and dad. And I also do this for work. Mm-hmm. Number 2, rethinking education radically. Mm-hmm. Your kids spend most of their time at school. So this is as important a choice as you can possibly make. Mm-hmm. And I think I learned this from you, Michael, that children's interests and passions decline over time that they spend in a traditional school. So your kid that loves animals and wants to be a biologist, that'll get beat out of him by 5th grade.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, they love math. Oh, it's beat out of them by 5th grade. And then they get into 6th grade and middle schools, all those transitions that are stressful. And then high schools like the Lord of the Flies. It's
horrible.
So yeah, number 2 is rethinking education. Number 3 is very broadly defined economic literacy. And I don't mean this at like theoretical economics, although a little bit. But there's basic concepts about the way the world works that schools don't teach. Mm-hmm. And when they do teach them, they teach them incorrectly. And so I think we have to take it upon ourselves to make sure our kids understand what that looks like and so we're going to create content. We had my other dad, Russ Roberts, in the studio. That's going to be coming out. Top 5 things you should know about economics and teach your kids. Media literacy number 4. In every one of these, I'm more the student than the teacher on all of this, but we have to figure out how to help our kids navigate this digital tsunami of information that they're being swamped by. It's something we have to actively engage on and manage and make choices about with our spouse. It's not something we can put on autopilot. There's things that have really detrimental effects, like pornography and excessive video game addiction, that can derail our kids, especially our boys. It can just derail them. It can wreck them. The one of the things that's sort of strange is that there's games, and I'm a gamer. I have a PlayStation 5. I will log a couple hours of games a week. If games are awesome, but I'm saddened that my son was more interested in building in Minecraft than with Legos in the physical world. And that was one of the things about Waldorf that was really great. His creativity increased dramatically when we came down to Austin and put him in Waldorf and took away the screens.
Yeah.
It was incredible. We were a super Waldorfy house, nothing but wood blocks. I'm a creative person. Creativity thrives within constraints. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have to, as dads and as parents, it is our job to establish certain constraints that our kids can be creative. That's just essential stuff. So, and then, so that was number 5. And then number 6 is practical independence. And what I mean by that is knowing how to do basic things to get along in the world. Knowing how to change a tire, knowing how to do chores, knowing how to fix things, build things, do things with these. We have these things. How do you use these? Put these things to work, these opposable thumbs. That I think is sorely lacking And I think that's
Are these prominently displayed on your website? Are they kind of like?
not yet. Right now, these are internal pillars and guides for programming our videos against them. And over time, I think that they will not only build out into like playlists on YouTube, but I actually ultimately want to find other dads. I want to populate our channel with other voices. And I think, in some way, if you're a dad out there that loves any one of these things and wants to, possibly be a contributor, reach out to me, because that's something that we want to do. I'd love to have at least one like hero dad to contribute for each of these six.
I think you should publish them on your website. I think they should be high profile. I think they're brilliant. And they also, Dad Saves America is a great title, great kind of high level branding. But at some point after the kind of sentimental, oh, how nice, it's nice to have some meat. And
Yes.
I feel as though those six are really interesting, well thought out, and original substance behind the kind of high level thing.
Yeah, this
So
is pretty hot off the presses stuff, but I'm glad it resonates with you. In some sense, I've been sort of like, I'm just starting to roll this out for other people to give feedback on. So that means a lot to me to hear that feedback from you, Michael.
yeah, no, I think it's fabulous. We're officially over time, but thanks so much, John, for appearing on our program, both at the keynote and here. And if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Well, if you're here, I'd say you hit me up over email, john@eo.foundation. I'll put it in the little chat here. And then if you go to dadsavedamerica.com, at the bottom of the homepage, right now the webpage is quite simple, but over time it's going to really get built out. You can sign up for our email list, so you'll get reminders of when new videos are published. If you're not somebody like me who's on YouTube constantly and doesn't miss when things get published. Yeah.
So I'll shamelessly self-promote it. Go subscribe to Dad Saves America and encourage everyone in your network to do so.
And we're going to be having a really great interview with Michael Strong coming up on the channel very soon. So there's that too. I'll shamelessly promote right back at you.
All right. Thanks so much for coming, John. And we'll see everybody else at the bottom of the hour with our next keynote, Ryan Delk. Take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.